What if your own skin could betray your deepest, most hidden secrets? I mean, what if a machine could literally draw a picture of your anxiety, your fear, or your surprise just by reading your body's electricity?
I know, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction, right? But what if I told you that over a century ago, two pioneers of psychology believed they were on the verge of doing exactly that? See, this isn't a story about the future. This is a forgotten chapter from the very, very beginning of psychoanalysis.
So let's set the scene. Our story begins in a Zurich psychiatric clinic, way back in 1907. It's here that two figures, a neurologist named Frederick Peterson and a brilliant young psychiatrist who, would soon become a giant in his field, Carl Jung, they embarked on this incredible quest to see if a strange electrical phenomenon could be a window right into the human soul.
So, how did they even begin to tackle such a wild idea? I mean, how do you put a number on a feeling? Well, it all started with this bizarre physical phenomenon that they believed could make the invisible visible. The big idea was something they called the psychophysical galvanic reflex. Now, the core concept is actually pretty simple. When you have a strong feeling, like fear or surprise, it triggers a tiny but measurable change in your skin's electrical current. They figured this was probably your sweat glands firing up in response. Essentially, it's an electrical echo of an emotion.
And their method for measuring this? Surprisingly simple, especially for the time. Okay, picture this. A subject would just place their hands on these big copper plates. Then they'd apply a stimulus, maybe a loud whistle, a sudden noise, or even a pointed question. The resulting electrical flicker was then recorded by a pen on a rotating drum called a kymograph. It was literally drawing a picture of the feeling as a wave.
But before they could go hunting for hidden secrets, they first had to figure out what a normal emotional response even looked like, right? They needed a baseline, a control group for the human heart.
And what they found was just fascinating. The waves of emotion were quantifiable. Just the threat of a needle prick produced this huge electrical wave. An unexpected loud noise created a medium one. And a simple mental task, like, say, multiplying 8 by 12, it barely made a blip. For the first time, they were actually seeing the size and shape of different feelings.
This led them to a really crucial discovery. Repetition mattered. Threaten a needle prick once, and the wave was huge. The second time, it was smaller. The third, smaller still. The subject was just getting used to it. The emotional power of the stimulus was literally fading right there on the graph. This gave them a baseline for how a normal emotional reaction should decay over time.
So this led them to a really bold conclusion. And, I'm going to read this directly from their 1907 paper because it's just so powerful. The galvanometer is therefore a measure of the amount of emotional tone and becomes a new instrument of precision in psychological research. They really believed they had found a new scientific tool to objectively measure our inner world.
Okay, so they could measure normal emotions. That's cool. But Jung, he had a much more profound goal in mind. He wanted to use this machine to find things that were hidden, things buried so deep that the person themselves didn't even know they were there.
And this brings us to one of Jung's most famous ideas, the complex. You can think of it as a knot of repressed emotions and memories, all tangled up around a single theme, deep in your unconscious. It's kind of like a psychic sore spot. And Jung wondered, could his new machine actually find it?
So, to hunt for these complexes, they started using word association tests, and the data from one case was particularly weird. The stimulus word warm gets the response the stove, the sun gets burns. These specific words triggered huge electrical waves on the machine, but the connections just seemed odd and kind of out of place. And here's the real kicker. When they asked the patient about these strange, high-energy reactions, he had no idea why he said those things. To quote the paper, he, quote, answered that he had had no particular thoughts and was evidently unconscious of any special complex. The secret was hidden even from his own conscious mind.
Then the whole mystery just unraveled. They distracted him and then casually asked about the word floor. And suddenly, the patient remembered. A stove in his house had recently malfunctioned and burned the floor. He had to pay for all the damages. The words warm, sun/burns, floor, and pay, they were all unconsciously linked to this one single stressful event. The machine had found his complex. It worked. Now, this was way more than just a clever trick. It had profound implications for understanding the mind, especially for studying severe mental illness. It gave them a completely new, objective lens.
Its diagnostic potential was immediately clear when they started comparing different patients. On one side, you have the lively, fluctuating emotional wave of a normal person. On the other, well, the reading from a patient in a catatonic state is a nearly flat line. Even the actual prick of a needle produced almost no reaction. It was physical evidence of their profound disconnect from reality.
They also measured something they called latent time, which is basically the delay between the stimulus and the electrical response. For a normal person, they calculated an average reaction time of about 3.77 seconds.
But for a patient in an acute catatonic stupor, that time just skyrocketed to an astonishing 15.6 seconds. That's over 4 times longer. A stark numerical representation of the massive processing delay happening inside their brain.
And look, Jung and Peterson's 1907 study wasn't some historical dead end. It was a starting pistol. Its core principles became a key component of the first modern polygraph. Yep, the lie detector in 1921. By the 1960s, it had evolved into biofeedback therapy. And today, this same basic idea fuels cutting-edge fields like affective computing and even neuromarketing.
So when you boil it all down, the legacy of this early research is just immense. It provided some of the first physical evidence for Jung's theory of unconscious complexes. It became the heart of the polygraph. It paved the way for modern biofeedback, and it gave psychology a whole new objective method for studying something as slippery as human emotion.
Which, of course, leads us to a final, pretty provocative thought. If scientists could get this close to reading the unconscious using just copper plates, a battery, and a mirror over 100 years ago, what's next in our quest to truly map the human mind?